Alright, hello. Someone asked me to make a Frost Mage guide, so I figured, what the heck? It's pretty easy. I can just jump on and do this. 1 second. What am I doing? I'm obviously making a Frost Mage guide. Anyway, so your rotation. You have basically 4 abilities that you press, and the rest of them don't matter. You got Frostbolt, which is the main one you cast all the time. You just keep sending it, keep sending it, keep sending it. You get procs on the side. That's the wrong proc game. You get this Fingers Frost. Makes your Ice Lance almost guaranteed to crit, depending on your actual crit rate on 2 targets if your range play nice. This is better than this for AOE, because this makes both your Ice Lance and the one you cleave split. The Flurry proc just makes it crit on your primary target, so it does less damage on the secondary target. That doesn't really matter, but I'm just throwing that in there. Then you have Flurry, which is the upper proc that you get. Right here. This enables your next 2 spells to shatter, which means they just have increased crit rate. So you always want to spend this on Ice Lance, and you're always going to want to Frostbolt into it before you double Ice Lance. The reason you want to do that is because Flurry actually hits 3 times. You can see it says striking the target 3 times. Each time it strikes the target, it applies both stacks, right? Applies 2 stacks of making your next thing crit. So here, watch this right here. There. If you notice, the debuff applied 3 times. It refreshed itself 3 times, and because you're frostbolting before you flurry, your frostbolt will actually hit during one of those stacks, and because of that, it'll have the increased crit rate. See? It just crit. And I still have 2 stacks, so I can still double Ice Lance. So yeah, that's the main ability. You're just gonna be spamming Ice Lance. For your talents, you take these pretty much all the time. You always have Lonely Winter, at least this tier. Shimmer and Icy Flows, doesn't matter, choose one of them. You will always take Rune of Power. Focus Magic used to be pretty viable. If you gave it to another Frost Mage, you traded it with them. It's not anymore, just take Rune of Power. I mean, it kind of is, but really, because you'll have a higher tier conduit, it doesn't matter. So just take Mirror Power. You pretty much always take Chain Reaction, mainly because we're primarily playing with this Legendary. We'll get to that later. Here, you take whatever you want. This is the only one that's a damage increase. I'll explain that later. The other 2 do not increase your damage at all, except maybe this one, which you might want to take if you're running Freezing Rain. This, for any single target content, you will take Splitting Ice. Freezing Rain is very strong in Mythic Plus, especially, I would not recommend it if you're pugging. That's really it. If you're doing like 20 plus keys and you know what the route the tank is going to go, I would take Freezing Rain in pretty much every key except for Plagueful, Mist, Spires, and Theater of Pain. But you also should not take Freezing Rain unless you know why, okay? So anything below like a 20, 22, where you don't know where the route you're going is, just take Splitting Ice. The only exceptions would be Hall's Atonement and the other side, in which case Freezing Rain is still really strong there, even if you don't know what route they're going to take. But for DOS, I'd also recommend Splitting Ice, because it's hard to reach to kill the final boss, Shade. So yeah, Hall's really the only one you're guaranteed to go this. Here, you always choose Thermal Void. There's no other choice. Okay, so let's get more into what the rotation is going to look like. So you have your Icy Veins, right? And you should have, this is the only conduit that will affect your playstyle. So this, when your Icy Veins is active, your critical hits reduce its cooldown by 1.5 seconds. So your goal is to reduce your Icy Veins cooldown by so much that you reach the next Icy Veins while you're inside of it. For general cooldown management, you basically just use Icy Veins when you're sure that you'll be able to get most of its cooldown back before it ends, right? So you don't want to use it when a mob's at like 20% HP or when a raid boss is about to go into a unhittable mechanic, or when you just, can't hit the boss because you have to do a mechanic. So that's the general rule for that. For this, Rune of Power, you just cast it off cooldown. Just cast it once this thing's Rune of Power is gone. So one thing that you can do, it's nice to go into Icy Veins with 2 Ice Lances ready. These are not these are not snapshot spells. So I do this. If I sent the flurry in the air before I procced my Icy Veins, it would still have gotten the benefit from my Rune of Power and everything. So generally you want to cast your Frostbolt before you go into Icy Veins. Then you just use everything on cooldown. It is not worth holding your Frozen Orb for Rune of Power because they don't line up. Don't hold it. Unless you've Blizzard sometime in the fight, and it's very close, like with sub 7 seconds. Then you can hold it. Other than that, you just do this. Frostbolt into Flurry, double Ice Lance. Frostbolt again. Keep Frostbolting. I get an Ice Lance proc, use it again. And you just keep Ice Lance. Alright, get that, do this, boom. Now, the only time this can become a little bit confusing is if you have Fingers of Frost proc and you have a Brain Freeze proc here. So if you are not casting anything, you shoot your Ice Lance proc. If you are already casting Frostbolt, just finish the Frostbolt and do 2 Ice Lances. You'll waste your Fingers of Frost, but it's not worth losing the chance to get another Brain Freeze proc. Brain Freeze is worth about the damage of 3 Ice Lances, so it's better than just losing that one. So yeah, you just cast everything on cooldown. Mirrors of Torment, also cast it on cooldown. We'll talk about that in a second, but if you are playing Frost fully, you will want to be Venthyr, okay? I've seen a lot of confusion in the Mage Discord recently because people are seeing that a lot of Frost Mages and higher tier M+ are currently playing Night Fae. You can ignore that. The reason they are playing Night Fae is because they want to off-spec fire, and because Night Fae is strong for Frost and AoE. It is a damage loss single target. And not every dungeon is a good Night Fae dungeon. So they are playing it so they can off-spec fire. If you want to play Frost full time, you should be Venthyr. And I'll have a guide about Covenants in 9.1.5 sometime soon. For Venthyr, when you are Venthyr, if you unlock the last trait, then Theatar is the best Soulbind. Okay? You're like, why? This gives you mastery, and mastery is kind of bad for us, but it still gives you mastery. Mastery still gives you damage, and this is a very strong end trait. So, plus you can go 3 potency conduits, which you can't as Nadia, and our potencies are very strong. For single target, your potency conduit, you always want to empower Icy Propulsion first, if you have one empowered. Second, doesn't really matter. But for single target, you will run Ice Bite and Unrelenting. Nope, not that. You will run Ice Bite and Siphon Malice. This is your single target. There's a lot of cleave or just straight up AoE. Unrelenting Cold is the next best option. It is the best option for AoE with Splay Ice and everything. And if you are running Freezing Rain, drop the Ice Bite for Shivering Core. Okay? Pretty simple, you know. If you have Splay Ice and you're doing AoE, Ice Bite and Unrelenting Cold. If you have Splay Ice and you're doing single target, Ice Bite and Siphon Malice. And if you are running Freezing Rain, which you'll never do in single target, then you'll just have these to buff your AoE damage. Because your Blizzard does almost the most damage overall. Or it will do the most damage overall if you're running Freezing Rain. Yeah. The other things don't really matter. This is the best defensive conduit you can have. Obviously, this is one of the best finesse conduits, and I like running this because Ice Block is very useful. So. I guess I should explain our AoE rotation because I did single target rotation earlier. So we'll go over to the AoE dummy. You will want to have this. This is the legendary that you will run in 95% of your playtime as Frost. Okay, let's open the legendary page. You have this. While Frozen Orb is active, you gain Fingers of Frost every 2 seconds. That is the side one, the one that gives you only 1 empowered Ice Lance. If you are doing pure single target, you can consider Slick Ice. This is the best single target legendary. For this tier, the only fights that it matters on are Terragru, which doesn't matter, and Guardian. These are the only 2 where you'd run it. You could also potentially run it on Ner'zhul, but I don't know, I wouldn't recommend it. There's a lot of movement, so Freezing Rain's very nice there, and you can get Blizzard CDR off of Free Frozen Orb off the orbs. So yeah, you'd only run it on Terror Grew and Guardian. So pretty much you should make Freezing Rain first. Jesus Christ, Freezing Winds first, because this is a very strong legendary. Now, if you are doing AOE in Mythic Plus, right, or just in general, no matter what, on 2+ targets, you want to keep Blizzard up at all time. 2+ is 2 or more. And if you were starting a pack, you'll want to use Mirror's Image, because this disperses your threat. You don't generate as much as threat, right? So I won't get aggro if I have this out, and it also reduces the damage take by 20%, but yeah, you won't get hit because you won't have aggro. You'll want to precast Blizzard, send an orb, Icy Veins, and then you just spam Ice Lances. And my Blizzard's coming back up, recast it, right? Then you spam Ice Lances. You can cast Frostbolt in between. You can see my Frozen Orb's back. After that's done, you'll immediately do this, send out another Frozen Orb if you have it, and I should have cast Blizzard before casting my rune, but yeah. These don't matter. All you want to do is not do that. I don't know if you saw, but I just clipped one of my Mirrors of Frost procs. Don't do that. So yeah. In AoE, when you don't have Mirrors of Frost proc, you can either Frostbolt. I like to do this basically if it's a 8 or less target pull, or you can Arcane Explosion. Arcane Explosion is a good thing to do like this. So I'm shooting these, I have an open spot, Arcane Explosion, open spot, Arcane Explosion, shoot off 2, don't have an open spot, Blizzard, do this, and we're here. Now I pop my rune and keep doing this, right? And I would cast Blizzard and Frozen Orb and everything back. Right? That's your AoE rotation. Whether or not you Arcane Explosion or Frostbolt doesn't really matter, unless you're in incredibly high target counts, which you won't be. I can tell you right now that for the damage that Arcane Explosion does, it's better to cast it with Splay Ice, I found, for my damage at about 14+ targets, and with Freezing Rain at 8+ targets. But that's if you don't want to do priority damage or anything. That's just math of how much damage this does compared to how much damage my Ice Lances would do. This is never worth casting in AoE. You just don't cast in AoE. So on single target, you can do a couple things with this Conduit. It is worth it to delay your Frozen Orb to the end of your Mirrors of Torment, and you'll get more damage out that way, slightly though. If a mechanic will better line up if you Frozen Orb at the start of the fight as opposed to later on, then you can either do 2 things, right? You can either Frozen Orb and then Mirrors of Torment afterwards, or you can overlap them. It's like a 0.1% or 1% DPS loss to overlap them, so it doesn't really matter if you overlap them. Personally, I prefer to send my orb at the start of the fight and then Mirrors of Torment afterwards. The only fight that I don't do that on is Mythic Ner'zhul, so I can have my orb up for the first orb set. And that's mainly just for kind of parsing purposes, because you don't need orb to kill the orbs. Frozen Orb to kill the orbs, yeah. So, okay. I guess while we're at it, if you shoot out your Blizzard, and then you gain haste, say from Icy Veins and from Bloodlust, you actually get more Frozen Orb cooldown reduction. But it's only if you do it on a Blizzard that's already out and not one that you put out later. Just increases like the tick rate, so you get more ticks of this, and each tick reduces the cooldown Frozen Orb. Now why is this a damage increase? Well, if I do this, send this out in Frost Nova, you'll notice that all these things just crit a bunch. That's because of this passive that makes Frostbolts or Frost Mage work, which is Shatter. Right? Multiplies the crit strike chance of your Frost spells against frozen targets by 1.5 and adds an additional 50% crit chance. So you might be a little confused by that. What that means is you take your current crit, you times it by 0.5, so 50%. So this is 13.5%. which means if I add that, it's 40.5%, and you add 50% crit chance. So I have a 90.5% crit chance against shattered targets, right? Against frozen targets. So that's how you tell what your crit chance is for your Ice Lances that you get the Fingers procs for your Flurry debuffed targets, and for targets that you use Frost Nova on. So when you do that, you basically just get a bunch of cooldown reduction for your Icy Veins because of this, right? So this is how you sustain your Icy Veins to have basically 100% duration in combat and Mythic Plus if you're an AoE. So yeah, I would only recommend doing this on 5 targets or more. If you really want your Icy Vein CDR back, you can do it on 4 or more targets. I typically do it on 4 or more targets actually, but I'd recommend 5 or more because that's where it'll actually do a lot of damage. Because this will make you do a lot of damage if you shatter everything. So yeah. Other than that, I think that's pretty much it, honestly. I guess we can talk stat weights. Generally, your best stat is going to be haste. You should sim yourself, but you can see that I have pretty low crit rate. The soft cap, the amount of crit that will make your frost spells always do 100% crit rate against frozen targets, is 33.13%, right? And that is not a goal to aim for. That is too much crit. You don't want that much crit. What you actually want is about 30% crit, and then you want to go for more haste or more verse. You can see I have 27% crit, which is lower than what I'm advertising for, and that's because I have this. Basically just gives me 3% crit, right? The best way to tell what stat weights you should have is to sim yourself on raid bots, which if you don't know what that is, I'll put a link in the description, I guess. And anyway, after you hit around 30% crit, 29, 30%, you'll want to sim yourself again. It's just a general goal to aim for. You want to start putting most of your stuff into haste. You probably want about 26% haste, if that's possible. You can see I have a lot of mastery. I mean, not that much, but 200 for my weapons, pretty much. So yeah, you don't really want that. Verse is good for AoE. It's better than haste in AoE. Haste is your pretty much best single target stat, however. So yeah. If we want to talk about trinkets you can aim for, I mean, these are 2 of your best, but this is almost the best trinket in raid. The Forbidden Necromantic Tome. It's very strong. This is probably one of your best M+ trinkets, if not the best M+ trinket. You can get this every tier. Other notable trinkets in Painsmith, this is a pretty good trinket because it scales with haste, which means that each tick will happen faster if you have more haste. Unfortunately, the duration increases by 100% based on missing health and not the damage, which means the lower health they are, the less likely it is that the whole duration occurs. So you don't really see anyone running this, and it's really only good if there's breaks in the fight where its cooldown can recharge, like on Painsmith, ironically. Other than that, this is the trinket I have. Very strong trinket. It doesn't have 100% uptime, has 70%. It doesn't refresh with 3 stacks, which is pretty unfortunate. So yeah. And then the last trinket is this. This pretty much always gives you haste because you'll be in Icy Veins, and Icy Veins gives you a lot of haste. So this is good if you have a nice base crit of like 28, 29%, because the more haste you have, less crit you need because you'll be shooting off more frost bolts. In M+, what you want to aim for is mainly Unbound Changeling. You'll want to set this to haste. This is a very strong trinket, very much equal to the other trinkets I've mentioned already. And aside from that, yeah, I mean, you literally just want Indivisible Ooze. So if you are going purely in plus, you can just get the Changeling and the Ooze, and you will be all set to do huge damage. The other trinkets suck. They all suck. So, yeah. Alright. I've covered stat weights and everything. That's good. Okay. Yeah. We are good to go. You wouldn't ever use any other Soulbinds. The only Covenant we really play for Frost is Venthyr. Again, you play Night Fae only if you're off-speccing Fire or main specking Fire, off specking Frost, and if your main focus is M+, but Venthyr still an overall stronger all-around Covenant. So, yeah, thank you, Shane.